Ben Horowitz, please come on down. The price is right. Good to see you.
Likewise, good to see you. Thank you.
So Ben is an interesting guy on so many different levels. But I want to, before we even move on to any other discussions, I want to know what you thought of that as an investor in that company. What did you think of that presentation?
I thought he did great.
You ready to write him another check, or you want to pull all your money out quickly?
No, I keep writing dentist checks.
Okay.
All day long.
So you are, for anybody who doesn't know, a guy who's been around Silicon Valley now for a pretty long time. Mm-hmm. You're born in London, raised in Berkeley, schooled on the East Coast, back again on the West Coast. You did Netscape, LoudCloud, which later became Opsware, and then you started to move into this world of investment. And you did a bunch of angel investing in the middle part of the last decade, and then eventually you and Mark decided to do Andreessen Horowitz as an actual VC, as an actual venture fund in 2009?
2009.
So what was the decision? I mean, having done a lot of angel investing, what made you decide that after 4 or 5 years of investing pretty heavily as an angel that it was the right thing to do for you and Mark to actually start a real venture fund?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Well, we were kind of, being angel investors, we were very observant of the whole funding cycle and how companies were getting built. And we felt like the way companies were getting built was changing, but the venture capital model was very much the same as it had been when we raised money for Netscape and then also raised money for LoudCloud Opsware. So we thought there was a real opportunity to design a firm that was more for kind of the way a modern technology company got built.
So talk about that. What does that mean?
So if you go back kind of to the good old days, the go-go days of the mid-'90s, so Netscape, if you look at Netscape, first thing is it was kind of expensive to get the first product to market, or relatively expensive in that. To sell a piece of software in those days, first of all, there was no download thing because there was no Netscape. You had to get Netscape before you could download something. So that means you had to kind of sell it with salespeople or sell it in stores or those kinds of things. So just to get the product to market and to support it and cost like $5 million. Now, I think Twitter, it cost them $500,000 to get the initial product out. Facebook, it cost about the same. So the amount of money to get a product in market has dropped, at least tenfold and more for certain kinds of products. But venture capital was still pretty oriented around you need $5 million to get started. The second thing was, Netscape went public when we were 15 months old. And, that sounds really fast, and it is, but it wasn't the only company that went public very quickly. So it was very, very difficult to have a founder run a big operation and then also one that, was public in 2 years. Okay, you're not only CEO, and you've never been CEO before, but you're also public company CEO, and you probably have never worked in a public company, let alone run one. And so venture capital firms were designed to kind of bring in professional management teams and CEOs. So you take a founder, good idea, product starts to go, bring in the professional management team, and that's how it gets built. And we thought, well, today it would be nuts to replace Dennis or Mark Zuckerberg or guys like that, or Mark Pincus, with a professional CEO. One, it's not necessary. Two, most of the company is engineers. And so we wanted to design a firm that would basically help technical founders, become CEOs rather than replace technical founders with professional CEOs.
But this is kind of like a philosophical point with you guys, with you and Mark, is the notion that the old Silicon Valley model of having a founder who was the guy who got things off the ground and was the guiding spirit of the company, but then later needed to, after a couple of years, you needed to get that guy out and bring in someone from a big consumer products company or someone who was a Fortune 500 kind of manager, that was just all wrong. And that not only was it wrong for the new era, but that actually, if you look back historically, and you guys I know have done some research on this and looked at what are the great companies in Silicon Valley history and what do they have in common. And with very few exceptions, it's companies where the founders have gone on and stayed as CEOs and have run the company for many years into the future.
Yeah, that's right. And it kind of comes from the orientation we had when we wanted to be investors was, look, we want to build the lasting franchises. And that was kind of a goal almost separate from making money. It was like we really want to be part of that. And when you go back through history, as you said, IBM, HP, Intel, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, they're all run by their founders for a very, very long period of time. And having been a founding CEO, we really believe there was a real reason for that. Like, it wasn't just by accident. And the reasons are kind of several-fold. First of all is knowledge. The founder has hired everybody who's joined the company. They've designed the product themselves often. They've made every single product decision. They've heard every bit of customer feedback. So they have a set of knowledge, historical knowledge, that's almost impossible to replicate. So nobody can come in and just mind meld like that entire history. And then very related to that is kind of a moral authority. So you look at Foursquare. Like, why does Foursquare work so well? Why did it beat all the other little guys? What is it? What is it about it that's so magical that gets people to use it? Well, Dennis knows, but to walk in, you don't know. So what about the mistakes he made? How do you get rid of those? What assumptions can you toss to the side? That's really hard for a professional to do. So when you look at the long arc and you say, okay, where's the next innovation going to come from? How do you evolve the company? Having that knowledge base, having the moral authority to say, look, I can change anything that we've done because I'm the one who did it in the first place, is very, very powerful. And the last part is really commitment, not just commitment to the company, but commitment to a long-term strategy as opposed to a quarterly strategy. And so all those things combined make us very biased towards founding CEOs.
So as a practical matter, if I were to spend a week at Andreessen Horowitz, having spent my time in the past at a place like Kleiner Perkins, what's the difference between the firms? What would I find that's so different about the way you guys do business than the way that Kleiner or Sequoia or any of the kind of archetypal great venture capital firms from previous eras and from the current era still,
right,
how they do business versus how you guys do business?
Yeah, and I should say, those are all super impressive firms with far longer and more illustrious track records than ours. So I don't want to sound
you're not criticizing, but there is a difference, right?
Yeah, I don't want to sound too much like a jackass or anything, but they are different. And it starts with who the general partners are. So the first thing that we decided is, it helps to have founded and run a company if you're going to help somebody run a company who's a founder. And so when you look at our general partners, they tend to be founders and CEOs. So Mark, myself, Jeff Jordan, CEO of OpenTable, Scott Weiss, the founder, CEO of Ironport, Peter Levine, the founder or the CEO of ZenSource. And just being able to have advice from somebody who's been in that seat, we thought was important. But as important is that the firm bring to bear the kind of network that a professional CEO comes in with. So when you're a professional CEO, you do have some things that a founder doesn't have. If it's an enterprise company, you know a lot of customers. If it's a consumer company, you know all the guys in the ecosystem. You know great executives you can hire. You know great engineers you can hire. So we've sort of systematically built the firm out to build that network so that every CEO in the firm has a professional CEO quality, super high value network. And when you look at the headcount in the company, you can see that. So the traditional firms, if you look inside them, they might have 20 or 30 GPs and maybe 6 people on staff doing those kinds of things. We have 6 GPs and over 30 people on staff building out that network, making it kind of easy for a founder to step into that role.
Right, and you think that gives you, at this moment, given one of the things that's changed obviously over the years that you've been out here is that there's now a huge glut of money, and used to be that getting startup capital was a hard thing. Now it's the question is not where do you get the money because there's plenty of money. The question is what's the quality of the money, right? And so when you go to companies that you want to make investments in, and good companies have a lot of choice in terms of who they take money from. When they sit down with you and they say, Ben, why should I take your money instead of this angel money or this other VC firm's money? You say something like this. This is what you're pitching to them as being your kind of unique selling proposition as a firm. Wow.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think it comes down to one. I was smiling because, if you talk to the entrepreneurs who are trying to raise money, it's not as easy as you make it out. There's a lot of rejection involved. But to be quite honest with you, I would say that a lot of the things we do, differentiated and people value them as they get to understand them. A lot of the times entrepreneurs come to us simply because if you take money from us, then the engineers you hire and the executives that you hire have heard of the firm. Right. And so that it just makes them comfortable joining the firm, saying, okay, those guys have raised a lot of money. They seem to be reasonably smart and so forth. The other thing that founders like about the firm is we've kind of stated our investing philosophy and how we think about building a companies, which it doesn't sound like a big deal. It's like, well, this is what we think about how you build a company. But when you look at venture capital firms, even the ones that have been around a long time, how many people know what they think about how a company gets built? It's pretty secretive, and so that's been a big advantage for us.
Let me shift and ask you about what you think in terms of the kind of investments you guys are in the market for, and what you're looking at in the industry that's driving the way you think about strategically how you want to spend the money that your limited partners have given you. What are if I asked you to think of the two or three major technology trends going on in the industry right now that are important and interesting in terms of what I just said, in terms of how you think about making your investments, what would they be at the top of your head?
Yeah, well, the big giant trend is the platform shift, or what we refer to as the platform shift from kind of the web 2.0 to cloud computing on the back end and mobile computing on the front end, which is probably the biggest platform shift architecturally, easily since mainframe to client server, but in a lot of ways bigger than that. And that's led to a whole series of opportunities under that. So everything on the back end is changing. The way networks get constructed and work are different. So there's a whole set of new networking companies that are very, very interesting. The way storage works is different. The way databases works is different. The way management works is different. So everything is changing very, very fast. And then every application is getting rewritten on top of that. And then, the difference with mobile computing is also profound in that, my whole time growing up in technology, the enterprise, fundamental thing you could count on is the enterprise is controlled by Windows, particularly on the desktop. And the fact that that's changing is creating, there are all kinds of companies that you would never even imagine building in, say, the 90s or even the 2000s that now make sense.
We have not that many more minutes left. I'm going to try to, you guys have an extraordinary, your portfolio is really extraordinary, and you guys have invested either at early stages or at later stages in a lot of really interesting companies. Mm-hmm. And you've dealt with a lot of really interesting personalities in the course of your career. I'm going to run through a list of some names of firms or human beings, or people pretending to be human beings. Yeah. And I'm going to let you give me your snap judgment about those things. In one word, or one sentence at the most, sure. But no more than one sentence. All right, I prefer one word, but one sentence will be fine. Facebook.
Best run company.
Best run company. Mm-hmm. In the Valley, in the world.
In technology.
In technology. All right, Groupon.
Fastest growing company in the history of business.
Wow, a lot of superlatives coming here. All right,
you're picking good companies.
I hit a couple big ones. Instagram.
Very innovative, very interesting.
Rockmelt.
Great team, great idea.
Execution.
Excellent.
Okay. Twitter.
Changing the world.
Zynga.
Love it.
The SEC is listening. Steve Jobs.
Well,
you could use more than one sentence on this one.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so much said and written about him. He's it's just so spectacular what he did for the world and with his life. And then people have compared him to Thomas Edison and people like that, and I think that's right. I mean, I think that's right in terms of the importance and the impact that he's had on the world, and just how many people one of the most magical things for me about him is just like how many people he proved wrong, like over and over again. I mean, everything, every step of the way was questioned. Apple was completely dead when he took it over. 3 weeks away from bankruptcy, and not a single person in the industry, including me, thought it was possible to turn around. And not only did he turn around, made it the most valuable company in the world. So, what can you say?
It's hard to even summon the right words. I was going to say Mark Zuckerberg, and I'll now tie it back to your comment about Facebook being the best run company in technology. Is that because of Mark, or is that because of Mark and Mark's team, or is it both?
Well, I definitely think it's both, but I think that he is, in my view, and I pay a lot of attention to CEOs, is probably the best new CEO that I've seen. He is incredibly thoughtful about how he's constructed that company, how he does the product strategy, and little things. And I've written about it. Well, one of the things that I spent a lot of time talking to him about is, Facebook has lower titles than most companies in the Valley. Generally the word is you go to Facebook, you have to take a one-title demotion. And just the thinking behind why he does that is really, I would say, greatly insightful into how hard he thinks about these management issues. So, it's everything from he wants people to come to Facebook for the right reasons, not the wrong reasons. He wants them to come because they want to work for Facebook, not because they want to be a vice president. And then that goes into how they get oriented. So whether you're an engineer or a product manager, an engineering manager, you have a 2-month boot camp where you have to go through and help build products. And if you're not about building products, if you're about something else, you're not going to play there. And I would say that kind of thinking is pervasive across everything they do, and it's not surprising that they have such great product velocity even as they get larger, because it's an extremely well-run company.
How much of an influence on your way of looking at the world is the guy who first hired you out of Silicon Graphics, or maybe even into Silicon Graphics, Jim Clark?
Yes. Well,
positive role model, negative role model, a little bit of both.
He's like one of the great innovators of all time. I mean, Silicon Graphics when I was there was Google, in terms of where every engineer wanted to work. The engineers who I work with at Silicon Graphics are still the best engineers that I see around. I mean, one of them, Chris Wagner, is working on a company I'm on the board of, and he's still the best engineer in the company. And another, Kurt Akeley, who's the father of kind of computer graphics, really, is at another company, Lytro, and he's the best engineer there. I mean, these guys that Clark assembled are still normally you think, engineers do their best work, when they're young. Well, these guys were so good, they can still outplay. It's like a 50-year-old quarterback. They're still better than any of those guys. So it's really impressive. But
interestingly, though, not a guy who actually, in terms of conforming to the original thing we talked about earlier about technical founders who go on to be great CEOs. Whatever you would say about Jim, that was not a quality that he shared. He's one of the outliers, right?
Yeah, he's not one of those. That wasn't his temperament. I think that, and not every founder can be CEO. And it's, I don't want to we prefer founding CEOs. We don't demand founding CEOs. And Jim in particular, I think that wasn't the kind of person. He was really, the creative genius, mad scientist, incredibly creative, but not necessarily the person who's going to run the company.
All right. They're now telling us the time is up, and I'm going to ask you one last question. I'm going to let you just describe in one word what it's like to be a partner with Marc Andreessen.
Well, it's great being a partner with Mark. Not only is he, is he my business partner, but he's my best friend, so we get along great. And a lot of people say, that we're like an old married couple, so we're bickering all the time. And it's great to have somebody who you can still upset and fight with on a daily basis, even though you've known them for a very long time.
That was great. A lot more than one word, but they were good words. So thank you very much, Ben Horowitz, for coming up today. And
thank you. Thank you, John. Have a good flight. Thank you very much, Ben. Appreciate your coming. All right, we're going to lunch. Once again,